Good evening, person. Okay. So I'm Rahul Saha, and in the last class we had discussed about the specificities of the defense system, which is offered by the lungs, specifically the upper respiratory tract, and what is the mucociliary escalator, how does the cilia they beat upwards to throw the or to eliminate the dust particles or propel the dust particles towards pharynx, how the dust particles in the range of 10 micrometer are eliminated from the upper respiratory tract as well, and how when it goes to lower down the bronchioles, the specific mucus layer, it eliminates dust particles which range at about 0.5 micrometers. So only the dust particles which are less than, you can say, 0.5 micrometer in diameter, they only are able to reach those particulate matter are only able to reach the lungs, right? Now, in the last class, I had told you that I would make you acquaint with the term sinus. Right? Many people have something known as sinusitis. So this intrigues us a lot. What is a sinus? Sinus is nothing but a hollow cavity. It is a hollow cavity present in the skull and facial bones. It is nothing but the hollow cavity. Okay, so those are also known as the paranasal sinuses. Okay, so these are air-filled extensions of the nasal cavity only. Now there are four paired sinuses named according to the bone in which they are located. Number one is maxillary, then we have the frontal, okay, then we have the sphenoid and ethmoid. See, four paired sinuses is asked in the examination. Number one is maxillary, okay. Then number two is the frontal, okay. Then we have number three, which is the sphenoid, and number four is the ethmoid. So these are the four specific paired sinuses. Okay. Now the function of the parental sinuses, you will be asking me, what is the function? So is a topic of major debate and major research. Okay. But various hypotheses have been given. So whatever research I have studied, whatever hypotheses have been postulated till now, those postulated hypotheses are: number one is it helps us to lighten the weight of the head because they are hollow cavity, not filled with bone marrow. Okay, they have pseudo-stratified ciliated epithelium inside it, so they help to lighten the weight of the head. Number one. Okay, we talk about the function of the sinuses or the paranasal, you can say, or paranasal sinuses. The main function is to lighten the weight of the head only. To lighten the, you can say, mass of the head as per perfect physics. Then, good evening, Arya. Okay. Then, number two is supporting the immune defense of the nasal cavity. Okay, as it contains, it is a pseudo-stratified epithelium, okay, ciliated epithelium, the paranasal sinuses helps to trap the, you can say, germ particles, okay, the microbes as well, supporting the immune defense. Okay. Then, of the nasal cavity, then humidify the inspired air. It helps to humidify the inhaled air or the inspired air, inspiration or inhalation. Inspired air, right? Then next is the role in increasing the resonance of the voice. So these are the probable resonance, you can say, of the voice. So these are the probable roles which are perpetuated by sinus. And what is sinusitis? Sinusitis is associated with the second specific function which I wrote down of the sinuses, that is supporting the immune defense. If there are some specific bacteria or viruses which hyperactivate the immune system, that will lead to recruitment of macrophages, then type 1 hyper, you can say, hyper sensitivity reaction, too many immune mediatory molecules or immune mediators like leukotrienes, chemokines being released, and that will lead to inflammation of the inner layer or of the sinuses. And that inflammation may be triggered again due to immune response like allergy, okay, by specific pathogen, a specific molecule, okay, could be a specific dust particle allergy, pollen grain allergy, and that leads to hyper mucus production or hypus, or you can say hyper secretion of mucus. Hyper secretion of mucus, which makes you feel extremely uncomfortable. Like these things may feel like blocked and all, right? So you may feel like the voice tone changes when you have everything blocked here, right? You might have noticed because when many times in one's lifetime one might have encountered the common cold, right? The rhinovirus induced common cold or the influenza virus induced, you can say, flu as well. So you might have noticed the voice tone, the baritone changes. So because of that only it changes. And in people who are extremely susceptible, vulnerable to that infection, okay, the inflammation, it persists. It doesn't go. And when it doesn't vanish, when you are extremely vulnerable, when your immune response in that region is always at its hyper level, okay, those cells are hyperactivated, the Th1, Th2 cells. That time what happens? You have persistent sinusitis. And in that specific case, in layman term, people call it that we have a problem of sinus. It's nothing but a persistent level or a persistence of sinusitis. Okay, so that is the role there. Now, taking this into consideration, let's switch to our next topic. Okay, the next topic is, you can say, the function of the nasal mucosa. Now, the mucosa of the nasal cavity, it prepares the inhaled air for arrival at the lower respiratory system. That is the primary function of the mucous membrane, epithelial mucous membrane, and the lamina propria underneath it, which I told you in the last class, that it contains connective tissue. You can say the areolar connective tissue known as the lamina propria, which will secrete some kind of mucus, right? It secretes mucus, which is made up of mucin protein, right? So this mucosa prepares the inhaled air for entry into or to the into the lower respiratory tract. It does contain the epithelium, mucosal epithelium. Okay. Underlying the epithelium Underneath it, it will contain areolar connective tissue, that is the lamina propria. It was described in the last class as well. Okay. That is known by the name as, technical term is lamina propria of this specific layer of connective tissue just underneath the epithelium, but not reaching the, you can say, the submucosal surface. You have mucosa, then you have the submucosa, then you have the hyaline cartilage, and then you have the adventitia. You have the four layers from deep to superficial. The most superficial is the adventitia, then hyaline cartilage, then you have the submucosa, and then the mucosa in case of respiratory tract. Now this lamina propria, it will have glands which would secrete mucus. Mucus is made up of mainly mucin protein. Okay. That sometimes come in the competitive examination. What is the constituents or the constituent of mucus, right? And now, throughout much of the nasal cavity, the lamina propria contains what? It contains an abundance of arteries, veins, capillaries, which do what kind of function? Which do a certain function of bringing nutrients and water to these cells that secrete mucus, or you can call them these secretory cells. Now, the lamina propria of a specific structure in the nose known as conche. Okay, first time you might be hearing. I'll show you the image also. The lamina propria of the nasal conche, okay, also contains an extensive network of highly expandable veins. So first let me write down, then I'll show it to you. The lamina propria of nasal conche contains, you can say, extensive network of highly expandable veins. Okay, I'll just show you the image, make it very clear what are conche. Okay, now what happens is this vascularization means the presence of a lot of veins or arteries. Okay, this vascularization, what it does is it warms and humidifies the incoming air. Okay, because what it will do is, the just understand, the incoming air, the temperature of the incoming air will invariably be lower than the temperature of the blood flowing through the veins. So when the air will come into the conche, I'll just show the conche to you. Just think of it as the rounded space. What will happen, it will come into contact with the veins, and the veins will radiate heat. Apply the 0th law of thermodynamics here. Suppose your hand is cold, my hand is warm. If you shake hand, what will happen is both the hands will come in contact, and then my hand will lose heat, your hand will gain heat, and then both the surfaces will reach an equilibrium of temperature, right? So understand that thing. Here the same 0th law of thermodynamics is applied. Warmer, you can say, the colder air coming into contact with the warmer blood, warmer arteries, they will be radiating heat. This air will become warmer, and you have moisture, so radiation of heat will be with the water vapor. So this water vapor will also be accumulated in the air, so air will also get humidified. Okay, and then that humidified air will reach the lower surface of the respiratory tract, and that is extremely essential, because if you directly bypass it, if you just choose to take breath from your mouth alone, not by nose, you bypass all these conche sinuses, you take breath from the mouth only. If you go to a certain region like Siberia, or you can say Himalayas, Rockies, Andes, all those stuff, Arctic, Antarctic, what will happen is, if you continuously, ceaselessly breathe from your mouth only, what will happen is, you will in turn cause damage to your lungs, irreversible damage, which can lead to your death also, because you're just inhaling, you can say, sub-zero temperature air, because that time and those specific areas the air temperature is much below 0 degree Celsius itself. Those are sub-zero conditions. So when I am inhaling that air, I am not making it warm enough. What is happening is that direct air, dry and cold air will lead to necrosis or will cause the death of the alveolar sacs, okay, the alveoli and the cells present in the alveoli, which I'll acquaint you with in the next class. Those are known as type 1 and type 2 pneumocytes, which make up the entire alveoli, the squamous epithelial cells. Okay, so those are the type 1 pneumocytes. So those cells will be undergoing necrosis or simple cell death, and then you will be making or causing your own death in the process. That is why it is advised that you should be going for inhalation through nose as much as possible, especially during the winter season, to avoid this kind of damage. And always, if possible, because when you take the nasal route, the entire mucosa is exposed to the air, and then that 10 micrometer and later on 0.5 micrometer law is put into action even more, and then you remove or eradicate, eliminate as much particulate matter as possible from the air that you are inhaling or inspiring. Okay, now you can say what happens is, I'll just show you the image. Okay, just show you the image of the, let me find it out, of the concave. Okay, so here I'll show you the image. I'll just share the screen. Now the thing will be clear to you what are concave. Okay, now it will be visible on your screen in just few seconds. Okay, I think now it's visible to you, the nasal concave. Now just look at this image closely. Okay, what you have here in this image, look at my cursor. Okay, see here. I'll just zoom it in even more. Now you can see is the, you can say, this is the image that you get when you go for this, you can say, specific horizontal section here. Now what happens is, just look here, this is the middle of the concave. So concave are what they are, just this specific, you can say, rounded regions. Okay, these rounded regions will do what? When a region is rounded, you can see here, not rounded specifically, they're the curved regions. Okay, the curved regions, they are known as the nasal concave. Now these curved regions will do what? When the air enters, like this is the curved region, it will keep on whirling and whirling, right? So more and more turbulence will be generated. So air will not be able to escape directly. Since more and more turbulence is generated, okay, the air will keep on swirling there, okay, and due to that whirlwind action, it will be in rapid and ceaseless contact with the arteries and specifically the veins which are carrying the warmer blood, or the blood which has a temperature more than that of the inspired air. Now, this concave will assist in the exchange of, you can say, water vapor and temperature from the expandable veins to the inhaled air. So just think it of, or just ponder it from the evolutionary perspective. Such great and such enthralling is our evolution, is see how twisted the concave are. That is why they are named as concave. Those are the twisted curved structures. Now if those structures were absent, air would have directly got in without having got the opportunity to go for the whirlwind action. If you didn't go for the whirlwind action, the turbulence might not have been generated. In the absence of that specific turbulence, you wouldn't be able to humidify and warm the air. And then that entire purpose of protecting the lower respiratory lower respiratory region would have been taken away, would have gone into vein, right? So that is the real deal. That is why conchi are present. Okay, so I can say that as cool dry air passes inward over the exposed surfaces of the nasal cavity, the warm epithelium, right, it will radiate heat and water, okay, in the mucus evaporates because the mucus layer does contain water or not. So the water in the mucus layer would evaporate. In this way, the air which moves in, okay, the air which moves in, right, will be completely warmed up and also be humidified, okay, almost equivalent to our own body temperature of 98.4 or 5 degree Fahrenheit or 36.9 degree Celsius, okay, and it is also nearly saturated with water vapor. Now these changes, they are extremely indispensable, you can say, for the protection, okay, for safeguarding our own respiratory surfaces from chilling or drying out, okay, which are, you can say, two deleterious or disastrous event. The opposite of this would be true, okay, the opposite of this would be true when we are exhaling air. Means as air moves out of the respiratory tract, it again passes over the epithelium. Just imagine, I am now exhaling through my nose, not through my mouth. Exhaling through my nose. So it again goes to the concha and comes out. Now, air which comes out from the lungs, okay, will be having, okay, more warmth, a higher temperature, okay, than the air that enters, okay. So an air that moves out of the respiratory tract, you can say, will again pass over the same epithelial region of the nasal cavity, the nasal concha. Now this air is warmer, you can say, and more humid than the air that enters. Now since this air is warmer, what will it do? It will warm the mucosa. Warm the mucosa means what? The mucus layer will be able to get the, you can say, due to condensation, water vapor will be condensed, okay, onto the cooler surface of the mucosa because this is warmer, okay, than the mucosa of the nasal cavity. So the air will get dehumidified, the mucus is getting its water back, just imagine, and also the temperature, okay, is being radiated in the retro direction, in the opposite direction to the veins and arteries, okay. So it is being dehumidified. Since it is warmer, it has more, you can say, humidity, water vapor, since it is coming from the lungs, and it is getting cooler as it passes off. So then when we are exhaling the air, it is always cooler. Then we are inhaling, it becomes warmer. So the thing is, the mucus never dries out. Just think this in a perspective, okay, in a, give it a, you can say, diligent thought, that if this process never happened, then what would have happened is the mucus would have lost all the water. So when we are exhaling, the mucus is gaining that water, and the arteries, especially the veins, are gaining that heat. Otherwise, they would have cooled down. This entire process would have then costed a lot of ATP for the maintenance of heat. That would have been useless ATP to maintain the heat and warmth. A lot of water would have been used up to keep the mucus, you can say, hydrated. So this keeps the recycling process going or not. Again, a great evolutionary process. Okay, so our body is a great evolutionary specimen, you can say, that everything is being balanced in a very, very homeostatically specific and tremendous way. Good evening, Samish. So that is how that entire thing goes on, that humidification and dehumidification of the air which is inhaled and then which is exhaled, okay. Now coming on to, in the last class I had talked about, okay, in the last class, okay, we have talked about the intrapleural pressure. Okay, that concept I'll also tell you, that how do we inhale air in the first place properly. Okay, because in the last class I told you the physical concept, right, the Boyle's law behind the inhalation of air. Okay, so in this class I'll tell you why is the intrapleural pressure, okay, the pressure in the pleural membrane I have told you, or the pleural fluid, okay, is always, I told you, subatmospheric. Why so? Okay, means it is mostly 756 mm Hg. So if you think it from the mathematical perspective, okay, it is minus 4 mm Hg. Okay, because 756 minus 760, which is the atmospheric pressure, will give you minus 4. So this is subatmospheric, below, sub means below, so below atmospheric pressure. So this is known as intrapleural pressure, which is subatmospheric. Now why is intrapleural pressure subatmospheric? Okay, that is the question. Now two things I'll tell you. Number one is something known as, you can say, the transpulmonary pressure. Okay. Now, transpulmonary pressure is a topic in pulmonary physiology that has both a traditional definition and a more modern and alternative definition. So, we'll just get down to the cellular definition of TPP, transpulmonary pressure. Okay. Transpulmonary pressure. TPP. Understand it very, very clearly and sincerely. You will be able to completely comprehend the real meaning of, you can say, or the real significance of this pressure being minus 4. And if it wasn't minus 4, what could have happened? And suppose somebody stabs you in the chest with a knife that you might have seen in many Hollywood movies. Why does the chest collapse? Okay, you can just think of the chest as a balloon. Okay, just think it as a balloon. Just think of the lung cavity, the thoracic cavity as the balloon, the lungs as a balloon. Okay, what happens when the balloon, the air from the balloon, it escapes completely? What happens? The balloon will just deflate like this. But this doesn't happen in lungs. If this happens in lungs, it will never be able to inflate properly, and it would have collapsed. So you need to not let the lung collapse. You need to prohibit the complete lung collapse. Okay. So there will be always some elastic recoil which will, when you are exhaling, then there will be an elastic recoil which will try to make the lungs collapse completely. But there is also something which doesn't let it happen. Okay. So on these lines, this is very, very significant. Okay. Otherwise, you cannot breathe only. There is no use learning the entire respiratory system, the lungs, the right lung, left lung, then bronchioles, the pulmonary tree, entire thing without knowing that why can't we breathe and why can we not breathe when somebody is stabbed, or why is the pressure difference so and so. Right? These are the basic fundamental concepts, right? So the thing is, at the cellular level, the transpulmonary pressure is the pressure difference exerted at the interface between the alveolar surface and the pleural surface. That is the pressure difference exerted at the alveolar surface and the pleural surface, means alveolar pressure minus pleural pressure. If I do that, I'll get the transpulmonary pressure, right? Now, I can call it the transmural pressure, means the pressure on the inside of the structure minus the pressure on the outside of the structure, means I can call it alveolar pressure minus intrapleural pressure or not. I can just call it alveolar pressure minus intrapleural pressure. Simply I can write it like that. I can call it this is the transmural pressure, okay, between the alveoli and the pleura, also known as transmural pressure. Very, very significant. Okay. Now, what I can say is just imagine. Now, I have explained to you this thing like during inspiration, during inhalation, what happens? The diaphragm and the inspiratory external intercostal muscles, they actively contract. It leads to the what? Expansion of the thorax. When volume increases, pressure decreases, we are able to breathe. That was explained. Okay. Now the intrapleural pressure, which I told you is minus 4 mmHg at rest. It will become what? When volume is increasing, pressure is decreasing, so the intrapleural pressure will become more and more subatmospheric, right? It may reach a level of, during inhalation, the thoracic cavity or the thorax, it will just expand, and thorax expands, leading to, you can say, lowering of even the intrapleural pressure, right? Just concentrate on intrapleural pressure here, then it will be very, very easy. Intrapleural pressure. When intrapleural pressure is lowered, what do I mean? It means that it was already minus 4 mmHg, means it was 756 mmHg. Atmospheric is 760, so minus 4. It will get even lowered, right? So by suppose 2, so it became minus 6 mmHg. Means it reached 754 mmHg. It is never 760, it is always 756. Okay, so now I'll tell you why it doesn't equate to 760 at any time. Okay, now during inhalation, it has reached a value of, you can say, 754 mmHg. Now, when it has reached 754 mmHg, now what will happen? Okay, now consequently, if you think, the transpulmonary pressure or the transmural pressure will increase or not, because transmural pressure was what? Pressure difference between the alveoli and the, you can say, intrapleural pressure. So suppose alveolar pressure at rest, okay, at rest was 760, okay, minus 756. So trans TPP or transmural pressure here was 4 mmHg plus 4. Now it has decreased even further. So 760 minus, you can say, 754. Now it has become TPP of now 6 mmHg. Okay. So TPP has increased or not? TPP has increased. Okay. Since TPP has increased, what does it mean? TPP has increased means an increase in TPP during inspiration would lead to what? Would lead to more expansion of the lungs, as the force acting to expand the lungs, which is TPP, is now what? Is now, just understand this thing, is now superior, okay? Is now more than the inward elastic recoil exerted by the lungs. Okay, just imagine. Earlier, why it is minus 4? Because if it becomes 0, the lungs would have collapsed like this, all of a sudden like this. So minus 4, there is some kind of TPP. Now TPP being plus 4, okay, intrapulmonary pressure, when you subtract it from the atmospheric pressure, it is minus 4. But when you see here, when I subtract it from the, okay, alveolar pressure here, it is plus 4, okay. But if I do like this, 756 minus 760, it becomes minus 4, doesn't matter, okay. So that is the main role here, okay. So this is alveolar pressure, this is intrapleural pressure, okay. Now if this was not, if this was suppose 760, suppose it was 760, TPP would have been then 0. If TPP was 0, there would be no pressure gradient which would oppose the collapse of the lungs. The collapse of the lungs completely after the exhalation. It would have reached 760 again and all of a sudden full collapse. And then you wouldn't be able to inhale. Okay. So that would have been the problem. Now, in this case, what happens? The TPP increases when you are taking in or inhaling air, you are even dropping the intrapleural pressure even more, so 750 to 754. Now it has become 6 mmHg. Now 6 mmHg of TPP, okay, will be able to be more than the elastic recoil that collapses the lung. Earlier it was equal to, so the lung was neither getting collapsed, neither expanding. Now it will be more than the elastic recoil which would collapse lung, and therefore the lung would expand as a result more and more. When the lung expands as a result more and more, what would happen is eventually more and more air could be filled inside the alveoli. And again, this is not incessant or this is not continuous. When will it stop? It will stop when and only when, again, when the lung will expand. Okay. So what will happen? This value will decrease. This may reach 758. The lung is expanding. Now 758 minus 754. Again, you have reached 4 mmHg, right? Now again, this is the value at which, at 4 mmHg, this is the value at which the TPP is equal to the elastic recoil, which wants to collapse the lung. So now the expansion of the lung would stop, of the lungs, you can say, would cease. When expansion would cease, we would stop, we would cease the breathing and or inhalation process, and then we would go for exhalation. Then you can say the relaxation of the muscles, and again the contraction. The contraction will lead it to become 762, but again it will become 756. Okay, but the thing is, it will not completely collapse because it will hold. It will not be able to completely collapse because that intrapleural pressure at negative -4 will hold the lungs or will prohibit the lungs from complete collapse. That's why when you stab a person straight with a knife, it pierces through the pleural membrane and then that pressure vanishes, and then that pressure becomes equal to the atmospheric pressure. That -4 pressure, due to the presence of the pleural fluid, it vanishes, and then the lungs completely collapse like this. And then you cannot breathe. Okay, after this one you cannot breathe because of that reason only. Okay, so that is the reason behind the lungs collapsing after a stab wound. Okay, so this is the entire concept regarding the significance of the intrapleural pressure being subatmospheric or -4 mmHg at rest. It is never equal to 760. Even at rest, it is equal to, you can say, 756 mmHg. This is the value of the intrapleural pressure even when you are at rest. Okay, so this is the main, you can say, concept behind the perpetuation of the breathing process. Otherwise, we would never be able to breathe, right? Now, coming on to the nosebleed. Okay, nose bleeding you might have heard of, some, or in some cases it might have happened to you. That is absolutely normal if there is not extreme nose bleeding, which can occur due to injury or extreme hypertension. But normal nose bleeding is completely normal. Why does it happen? Now, the extensive vascularization of the nasal cavity and the vulnerable position of the nose, it makes a nose bleed a fairly common event. In case of NEET examination, nosebleed, the technical term is epistaxis. Okay, so it is known as epistaxis slash nose bleed. Now, we know that there is extensive vascularization in the nasal cavity. Extensive vascularization in the nasal cavity. And since it is completely exposed to air, if at all extremely cold air gets in, okay, then it can happen. Or in children, they keep on pricking the nose, right? The bleeding, or the leading cause, you can say, of epistaxis or nosebleed in children is what? Is nothing but nose pricking. They keep on pricking the nose, and the sharpness of the, you can say, the nails, that can cause the rupture of the minutest of the veins or the capillaries, right? Both. Now, this bleeding generally involves the blood vessels of the most innermost layer, right? That is the mucosal layer, which covers the cartilaginous portion of the septum, which divides the two nose, or which divides one nose into two nostrils, right? Now, any other cause could be the trauma, such as punch to the nose. If you are a boxer, you might be knowing. Then extreme drying, I told you that you are just roaming around in this chilly air condition and driving on bike or bike driving, long driving and all. Then infections, allergies, or any kind of clotting disorders, right? Any kind of thrombotic events. Even hypertension, I told you, extreme pressure can cause vessel hemorrhage here in the capillary that I was talking about. So hypertension can also cause nosebleed later on in life. Okay. So the next topic that we'll be talking about is the pharynx. Okay. The pharynx or throat. Now, when we talk about pharynx, okay, so the pharynx is a chamber which is shared by the digestive and the respiratory system, both. It is a chamber that is shared by the digestive and respiratory system. Now, you might have heard of epiglottis and all that, which prevents the food from going into the trachea. Everything regarding that will be explained in this class and in the next class as well, right? So, what happens is it extends between the conae and the entrances to the larynx and esophagus. Okay. Now, the curved superior and posterior wall of the pharynx are very closely bound to the axial skeleton that I had taught you. The axial skeleton. Okay. Not the appendicular, to the axial skeleton. But the lateral walls or the lateral walls are quite flexible, okay, and muscular. But the thing is, the pharynx is divided into three parts: the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. Okay, it is this is of main pivotal importance. It is divided into three parts. Okay. Number one is the nasopharynx. Number two is the oropharynx. Number three is the laryngopharynx. So this specific division, okay, this specific classification or nomenclature comes in the examination or is asked in the examination. So it all starts with the nasopharynx, then you come to oropharynx, and then we come to the laryngopharynx, which is close to the larynx or voice box. So you can call the nasopharynx as the superior portion of the pharynx. Superior means in biology on top, inferior means down. Superior, it doesn't mean that you are superior to someone. Superior means you are on top, like the heart is superior to the liver, like this. So that is known as the right lung is superior to the liver, that you can say. So it is on top of the liver, and the liver is inferior to the right lung. That is the meaning of superior and inferior. So the most superior one is the nasopharynx. So the details about nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngopharynx, and what are the specificities of larynx, the cartilages of larynx, in that we'll be studying about epiglottis, cricoid cartilage, arytenoid cartilage, and the paired cartilages. Okay, that will be discussed in detail in the next class. Okay, and also the pulmonary tree, like what is the branching of the bronchi when they reach the lungs, how they become terminal bronchioles, and why is that branching important? What would have happened if that branching never occurred? Okay, again, those cross questioning will be answered. So I hope you are able to comprehend this lecture. If you have had any kind of doubts or queries, you can definitely ask me on my personal number. I will resolve your queries as soon as possible. Okay, then thanks a lot.